Alright, what's up everyone? Welcome back to another Slow 6 Fix. And today we're going to be replacing the water pump on a Mazda CX5. Alright, so here is said CX5 and the water pump is making a bunch of noise from the bearing. This is not my car. This is Egg's car. Say hi, Eggs.
Hi.
But we're going to be working on it today. So step one, get your car up. We're going to take the wheel off and we'll show you how to get to the water pump. Alright, so step number two, you're going to need to remove this panel. There's just a bunch of little plastic clips. You should be able to pry them up with a flat head and pull them out. And then your water pump's going to be behind this. There's like 4 clips, it looks like. Okay, so once you have that removed, you should have okay access to your water pump. Also, FYI, there's one that's kind of up there. Let me see that thing. There's a clip in the top corner that's kind of behind the fender liner. But once you look up in there is your water pump, and it's not going to be super easy to get to, so here we go. Okay, so I can't get my camera up in there very well, but there's your water pump. We're going to need to remove this belt. We're going to be replacing it, so I'm just going to cut it off to make my life easier. And then there's a wiring harness that's kind of on the side of the water pump over here that you're going to need to, it's just like clipped in. Let me see if I can zoom in there. You can kind of see it. It's right about there. It's like clipped to the water pump. And then the water pump itself, the bolts are kind of on the side of it. I'll show you on the new one. You'll be able to get an idea of where the bolts are. Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and cut this belt off. I got a pair of tin snips. That's just going to make your life way easier than trying to get it off, because we're replacing it anyways. And then we'll have to get this wiring harness out, and then we should be able to take the bolts for the water pump out. Alright, so here's the new pump. Now you're going to notice there's a bunch of bolts on the one side that like hold the pump together. You don't want to remove those. There's going to be 3 here, here, and here on the car. They're going to be your mount bolts for the pump. They look like they're probably about a 13 millimeter. I don't know if I can actually get anything in there to remove them without removing the pulley that's on the pump first, so we're going to see. Alright, so we did need to go ahead and remove the water pump pulley to be able to get to the bolts. So you can see them. Here's 1, 2, and the third one you can't really see with my camera, but it's right above that. Those are going to be a 10 millimeter bolt. We're going to take those out. Get yourself some sort of pan or something, because it's probably going to pour coolant out when you take this off. Alright, so I took the top 2 bolts out first and cracked the bottom one, and as you can see, the coolant is now pouring out. So get yourself a drain pan. I'm just kind of wait for that to drain before I pull it off, because it's kind of hot still. Alright, after fighting with it for an hour, we got it off. I ended up having to separate the water pump housing into 2 pieces. There's going to be 4 bolts along the side separated from the other part. Reason being is I could not get it off of that tube right there. There's an O-ring on it. It's really freaking tight. And then the other end goes into the block, and I actually ended up pulling the whole tube out of the block instead of pulling the water pump off the O-ring. So I'm gonna have to shove that back in there. O-ring looks fine, it's just freaking tight. Alright, so the reason we're replacing this is this car is making a hellacious noise, and there's the bearing is starting to fail in here, and we're getting some play in it. So we figured out it was coming from his water pump. So you're gonna have to take out this sensor unless you're putting a new one in. This is, I believe, your coolant temp sensor. Just take a socket and that should come off. Alright, so undecided on the internet whether you're supposed to replace this washer on this coolant temp sensor on the water pump. I did not. I have a box of them. It doesn't get very tight where it seems like it's a crush washer, so I'm just going to put it back on and hope that it doesn't leak. You're going to put your new gasket in. It only goes in one direction because it's kind of a certain shape. And then your installation is going to be just the reverse of that. So take this back under the car and put it back in. I'm going to put a little bit of coolant in this hole and on that O-ring that was really hard to get off. Try and make them slide back together easier, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so we have the new water pump in. It's interesting to get back on. Pro tip, if you're going to do this job, you might want to buy the water inlet O-ring. We had a hell of a time getting the pump back on because the O-ring was kind of stretched. We stuck a little oil in there, not really supposed to, but here we are. And we got it back on, so now we're going to try and get the belt back on. Alright, so in terms of putting the new belt on, I zoomed this in because it's really hard to see. That right there in the center of the screen is going to be your tensioner like bolts. So you're going to crank that so you can get the primary belt off so we can put the new one on. You're going to need a 17mm wrench. I could not get a ratchet in there because it's up against the frame rail. And now we're going to be trying to put this stretch belt on, and I'm not sure what the easiest way is, so we're going to find out. Alright, so an interesting technique that I had to YouTube is to get this back on. So you can put it on the crank pulley, zip tie through the pump hole to hold the belt in the groove, and then you should be able to crank the crank pulley, which will kind of walk the belt onto the pulley. Can't say I've seen that one before. Alright, so that's a wrap on the Mazda CX5 water pump replacement video. I am a bad YouTuber, and I was tired and didn't finish the rest of the video with like kind of getting the belts on. And the last thing you need to do is put coolant back in the car, but that part's pretty self-explanatory. I will show you one thing I do have. I'll drop a link. This coolant funnel kit is actually really convenient. So we took the radiator cap off. You stick this in the radiator. There's a plug for it. So you fill this full of coolant, use it to burp the car. There's a bunch of different attachments for different size radiators. And then once you're done burping the car, you put this little plug in. You can pull it back out of the radiator, and you don't have a funnel full of coolant spilling everywhere because it plugs it, and then you can just dump it back in the bottle. So that's kind of convenient, but that's another one for you. Project ended up being harder than I expected, but got her done. See you next time.